My name is Casey Sword. I'm Executive Director here at the Cabot, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to this evening's community conversation on mental health. Before we get started, I just wanted to kind of bring your attention to the fact that Community Conversations, this series, is something we've been doing for just about 2 years at the Cabot. It's a free series, and it's actually every month here at the Cabot. The last couple of evenings we had a Women's History Month program last month. We had a waste reduction event back in February, and I see a lot of familiar faces that come a lot. So I just want to thank you all for supporting this program. The first time we did this 2 years ago, we had about 10 people in the audience, and it's slowly grown to be a really wonderful gathering of our community in our beautiful historic theater here. So just thank you all for coming out. There's a lot you can do with your time, and we appreciate you being here. To look for future community conversations, just look at our website, thecabot.org, where you can find information about that and all of our upcoming events, both here and also at Off Cabot Comedy Events, which is our comedy and music space right down the street on Wallace Street. So to kick our program off tonight, I'm going to introduce you all. You probably know her because she's everywhere and everybody knows her and everybody loves her. Please give a warm welcome to Leslie Gould, Executive Director of the Beverly Chamber of Commerce.
Welcome, everyone. I'd also like to introduce co-chairs of our Health and Wellness Committee, Melissa McLaughlin, Mike LaCole, and we also have Stephanie Parker in the audience as well. She's also one of the chairs of this event. I do have some sponsors to thank, and then I just want to say a couple of words before we introduce Senator Lovely. We can't do this without our sponsors. Our gold sponsors are Addison Gilbert and Beverly Hospital, Beth Israel Leahy Health, Senior Care, Beverly Athletic Club, and Anchor Home Medical and Pharmacy. Our silver sponsors are the Artful Life Counseling Center, Russell Center for Chiropractic and Sports Medicine, Aetna Medical Solutions, and Encompass Health. We also have the Greater Beverly YMCA as our bronze sponsor. I just want to say that this is a big topic, mental health. I know that all of us are challenged with something, even if it's a small thing. I also want to say, I myself am one of those people, by the way. We all have something, right? Here's the thing. When you think of a Chamber of Commerce, you think of this big, large organization that is disconnected from the community. You might think it's an old boys network. You might think it's just strictly business. But the reality is that what we're talking about tonight affects everyone. And in correlation to the Chamber, it actually affects people, right? That's our power, and our workforce. So this is really about a community issue. This is about a national issue. We all know, and that's why we're here. And I just wanted to say, as the executive director, I am very proud that our members are tackling this issue because it affects everyone. So please give a big round of applause for all of their efforts and all of the speakers, because this is bold for a Chamber of Commerce to tackle this. So thank you. And thank all of you for coming. Melissa's going to introduce Senator Lovely. And she is quite lovely.
Thank you so much, Leslie, and thank you to everybody who has attended tonight. It's a great event, and we're here creating community, which is so important at this time. I would like to introduce Senator Joan Lovely as the moderator for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. So pleased to see everybody here tonight for a really important community conversation, as Leslie had said, to share our experiences. We have really wonderful panelists, and we will be talking about trauma, mental health issues, and pathways to healing. And before we begin, I want to just share my own journey with trauma. When I first came into the Senate, actually 12 years ago, I can't believe it feels like 12 minutes, I really wasn't sure that I'd be able to really attend to this issue, my own personal issues. And it took me probably the first year in the Senate where I could really talk about it, because growing up I was told that we didn't talk about these things. We just said, well, that happened, it's in the past, it's over. So here's my story. When I was 6 years old, a maternal uncle came to live with us. And some of you may know this story because I do talk about it now. And he had, my mother was the oldest of 10. It was her brother. He was in his early 20s. And my father was the middle of 10. So they were really used to big families. I'm one of 5. And in a 3-bedroom ranch in Beverly, right here in Beverly, where we grew up. And no questions asked. She got a call from her parents, my grandparents, and said, your brother needs a place to live, and he has to leave our house. And she said, we'll take him. And he moved in. And within a couple of weeks, he exposed himself to me. I was 6. What did I know? I thought that was pretty normal. And within a couple of weeks of that, he started to sexually abuse me. And that lasted for a whole year. And he groomed me. Now that I know, through my experience and my work in the Senate, he groomed me for that year. Took me out for ice creams and, took me for rides in his car. And little did I know that he was also sexually abusing my twin brother. We didn't know. He kept it very secret. In fact, he called it, it's our little secret. And it happened in a little bedroom off of our kitchen, which also next to that bedroom was like a little TV room. And my parents were sitting right in that TV room, and they had no idea. No idea, because he was a trusted member of the family. That's what happens. So one day, about a year into it, I revealed it to my mother very innocently, just said, geez, Mommy, I've seen everybody's bum. I've seen Daddy's and I saw Uncle David's. What do you mean you saw Uncle David's? And let me tell you, at now 7, I clammed up because I knew I did something really bad. So I never told my parents the whole experience of what happened, how extensive it was, until I was in my mid-30s, early to mid-30s, when my own daughter turned 6 years old, and it flooded back on me like a tsunami, a tidal wave. And I went to my parents and said, why didn't you protect me? And protect you from what? And it all came back, and I disclosed it. And my mother, the next time she ran into her brother, he would come and visit the house. She said, you're not welcome here. Did you sexually abuse my children? And he admitted it. He did. And there was nothing they could do about it. The statute of limitations had run years before. I went to the DA at the time, Jonathan Blodgett, and said, anything I can do about it? He said, I'm sorry, the statute's run on both the criminal and civil side. Not knowing that, someday I would be here in the Senate and be able to do something about it. So a year into, my work in the Senate, I started filing bills. And to remove the statute of limitations on the civil side and the criminal side, it's a big lift, but we're working on it. The statute of limitations on the civil side is 53. You have until you're 53 years old to disclose. What is up with that number, 53? Why 53? I could never understand that. So I've pushed hard, and we're hopeful to be able to get that bill to the governor's desk this session. I've also filed some bills to talk to educators about what to look for. If you have a student, especially a young student, sexual abuse manifests differently in the symptoms than abuse and neglect. And we have some really great, we have the Children's Trust, we have also another organization, Enough Abuse Already. These are in Massachusetts, and they teach educators actually all over the country and here, but we want to make it mandatory, a part of mandated reporter training, so that educators and people who work with children, youth-serving organizations, volunteer coaches, will know what to look for and save a child, because it is lifelong trauma. So I wanted to set the stage with my own experience that I do talk about and share, because I think it's important that we talk about this, that we share our experiences, and that we get the appropriate help. I've been through years of therapy. I have a therapist on call. And now I'm not ashamed to admit it. It's that stigma that, that we've all been too used to. So the stigma is being lifted. We're talking about this so we can help each other. So with that, I would now like to invite out our first panel. And let me take the microphone with me. I know how to do this. There. And the first panel we will be talking about informed trauma with Tara Briggs and Jill Manos. Tara is a certified yoga instructor, a Reiki practitioner, and a dedicated recovery counselor with trauma-informed approach. And Jill is a certified yoga therapist, and she believes, and I believe, that we experience many layers of discomfort, both physical and emotional discomfort, on a regular basis. So she weaves this into her practice on how to relieve this in her clients. So welcome, Tara and Jill. So we want to talk about informed trauma. Tara, for you, what is trauma-informed yoga, and what makes your specialty trauma-informed?
I'm experiencing trauma right now being up here.
It's okay.
So trauma-informed yoga is really about creating an environment where people can feel safe. It's about giving them options and the ability to choose. It's important with language. I've heard a lot sometimes in yoga classes, like I try to use anatomically correct language by using, your glutes rather than like bum you'll hear sometimes. So if someone's been, sexually abused, it's very important they use anatomically correct language. And again, by giving them options, because you really want to empower people on their mats. What else I was gonna say? I'm freezing. I knew.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
So just to really empower, it's language. It's holding that space for people. So in a non-stigmatizing way, non-judgmental way. And how I got involved in all of this is I myself have experienced trauma as a child and in my teen years. And I'm in recovery. I turned to substances as a teen, and I've been in recovery for 16 years now. And when I found yoga, it was a tool for me. It was a tool that I could connect with myself, be with the ick of it all, and begin to heal.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Jill, how do you weave, your practice into trauma-informed yoga as a yoga therapist?
Thank you. Yeah, as a yoga therapist, I work in a few different mental health facilities, and I also work with clients one-on-one. And a big thing that I do is meet with them with unconditional positive regard, really meeting them where they're at in that moment. The practice is not about me. I'm not walking in with some idea of this is what's going to happen, we're going to get to this, and this is how it'll be, but instead, really being eyes on, watching my clients, really listening to them, hearing them, validating them for their experiences, and letting them show up authentically without needing to mask, without needing to hide, because so much of us, so much of our time, we're hiding and we're masking. We're scared to be able to show up authentically and say, you know what? No, teacher, I don't want to move that way. And letting that be there. And as Tara said, empowering the ability to say, this is my practice. It's not about the teacher. It's not about the therapist.
Terrific. Yeah, absolutely. It's so hard because you do tend to hide. You hide your feelings. It hurts. And, when you have to think about these things, you relive the trauma. But that's okay, because that's a part of the healing process. It doesn't feel good. It never feels good. But it is a part of the healing process so that you can be able to attend. So thank you so much. Tara, let me ask you, what ways does trauma may affect people and their ability to be present?
Well, you become detached in your mind and body because it doesn't feel safe. right? So if you're used to running on that fight, flight, or freeze all the time, you're disconnected with yourself. So like my work makes me think of my work at the high school I work at Recovery High School, and when I was first brought in as a yoga teacher, when I would bring the students in, they would first they would just sit up, like they wouldn't lay down. They couldn't shut their eyes. They didn't feel comfortable. They've been physically abused, sexually abused. And it took, a long time and trust. And I thought I was gonna go in and teach like this vigorous practice. I'm like, these kids need to move, And it was the complete opposite. What they needed was restorative yoga. They needed to lie down. And it makes sense, right? Because they're always in fight or flight. They needed the rest and digest for the nervous system. And then within time, they would let me put blankets on them, right? Then they started to close their eyes. Then they allowed me to actually put my hands on them and give them Reiki. So the trust and to see that change, and I'll never forget this one boy, he was like a street kid, street smarts, and he would always lay there with his eyes open, like, And then finally he trusted me enough, he closed his eyes, and he would see me in the halls, be like, yo, can I get some of that Reiki later? And I'm like, yeah, sure, I got you. And right before he graduated, he had asked me, can we go do it? I said, yeah, and I gave him the Reiki, and he said, you know what I think about when I'm lying here meditating? He's like, I think of the ocean. And like this kid, that's a win. Like he was able to, that was all him. Like he sat through it time and time again.
And he was able to take a break, a moment from the traumas in his life. That's beautiful. That's wonderful. Jill, how about you in your practice? How does trauma, how it may affect people and their ability to be present in your practice?
So a big piece of the things I speak about is discomfort, is physical, emotional discomfort. It's here. I think often trauma, it leaves an imprint on us, right? So if we think of like a smoke alarm, right? It's going off. It is a loud beep, 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 beep. And we learn how to take that smoke alarm down, pop it under a pillow, and then pop another pillow on top, and another pillow on top, to the point that we can't even hear it, right? So there's chronic pain, there's emotional pain, there are things underneath all these pillows, and we mask them, hide them, and there's it's so hard, really, to start to peel back those pillows. They're scary. It's like, but if I pull it back, I'm gonna hurt. I'm scared. I really just don't want to. I know in my own practice, in my yoga therapy experience with myself, I'm like, but I'm not ready. And that's okay too. The acknowledgement that we are not always going to be ready to pull back those pillows. We're not always going to be able to just step in and hold space for the discomfort. Sometimes it stinks, to put it gently.
Yes, it does. Absolutely. Tara, back to you. What are the benefits of a trauma-informed practices?
Of course, there's the benefits that it helps with depression and anxiety. But the main thing I think is that when you can go inward, when you can sit with that stuff, that's when the healing happens. I don't know that we'll ever fully heal your trauma, but that you can, without, like Jill said, completely stuffing it down, masking it. I had a client that I work with who was wanted to do yoga, was terrified to go to a studio, and we worked one-on-one, and there were tears, and there was laughter, and there was all that stuff in between. And this person's goal was to one day walk into a yoga studio, and that person was able to finally do it. Now they go all over the place. Yeah. So it's really about sitting in that discomfort, being okay with the good, the bad, the indifferent, and empowering yourself. Just knowing that you're in control of your body, your mind, and taking that back.
So you reminded me of something that I left out of my personal story was, when I was in my 20s, I suffered for about 3 years with agoraphobia. Could not leave my front door. Couldn't go get the mail because of my trauma.
Right.
Because I did not know what was wrong. And thankfully, to a wonderful therapist who would meet me at the supermarket, first would come to my house and help me get back in my car and drive with my 3 kids. So I had 2 at the time and then a third. I was very resistant to medication. I was a nursing mother. I would advise my children differently today, but that was me then. And but thankfully to some really good therapy, I was able to get back out and food shop. And I remember when I graduated, I met her at the Burlington Mall. Drove to the Burlington Mall with my 3 children, and now, you know, but I look back at that, and that was therapy. So thank you for that, for what you do to pull people back out, to say it's okay, you're going to be okay. But it is the most frightening.
I know how it feels. So,
You do. Thank you. And Jill, same question. What are the benefits of trauma-informed practices in your practice?
I think a big practice is building our ability to be able to be present. And part of being present isn't about being here and being regulated all the time, which buzzword, right? Because everybody's talking about regulation of like, how do I be there? We don't stay there. Our window of tolerance grows, right? We have more ability to deal with the tough stuff. Excuse me, I squeaked. But that doesn't mean that we are gonna be in good space at all times. So this gives us the ability to validate our feelings, to acknowledge I'm in the experience of discomfort. I can hold space for it. I can't hold space for it. Or maybe I can move through it. And empowering that ability to hold that space for ourselves, and also to feel heard and to feel seen, to feel that support is huge in building our ability to show up and not mask. I remember being in a yoga therapy session shortly after my father had passed and just bawling my eyes out, just like straight tears everywhere, and then turning and looking at my yoga therapist and saying, I actually like myself now. Like, go me. I'm proud of myself. I am dealing with some real big grief and hurt and scared and so many years of discomfort, but like, yay, go me. And let me tell you, not all of the sessions were any yay, go me moments. A good chunk of them were not. But to have those bits of care and support, to be able to hold every single inch and part of me, and to support myself in showing up that much more authentically. And I think that's a huge part of the practice too, is that allowing the mask to pull back, allowing us to just be who we are as humans with a wide variety of feelings, and that they are valid and deserve to be shared and seen. With that being said, feelings are always validated, behaviors not always.
Wonderful. And, you know, the benefit of yoga, you know, especially the type of yoga that you practice with your clients, the emotional side, there's a physical side. And when you're physically feeling good, you're emotionally feeling good, typically. So I want to thank you, both of you, for being a part of the panel today and sharing what you do to make your clients feel better through trauma-informed yoga. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll now move to the second part of our panelists. This is our lead by example, and I will welcome out Dr. Rob D.G. Marino, who is a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in pediatric and family care, currently serving as a clinical director of psychiatry services at Mass General Brigham-Salem Hospital, and the owner of Ocean Gem Psychological Care, a private mental health practice here in Beverly and in Salem. Thank you and welcome, Dr. D.G. Marino.
Thank you for getting my name right.
So lead by example. How are children affected by, so we're going to be talking about substance use disorder and what you do in your practice. How are children affected by substance use abuse disorder?
It's a great question. Thank you, Senator. You know, it's interesting. Tonight we're having a conversation entitled Pathways to Healing. And I think similarly there are different pathways to addiction, mental health, and substance use disorders. Now there's the direct pathway that we all sort of know a lot about. Children, and just like adults, use substances, right? They drink, they smoke, etc. And that we can all know and understand and maybe have been there ourselves in some cases. I think what we don't realize, though, is there's several indirect pathways that I think it's very important for us to touch upon because they're much more subtle, much more discreet, and can really be quite insidious, but important sort of like red alarms that we want to look for, red flags that we want to look for when working with children. So for example, family history. If you have a family member, particularly a direct biological parent, who has a substance use disorder, you are more likely to experience a substance use disorder yourself. So if I am a newborn child in a hospital nursery, and one or both of my parents have had some kind of substance use challenge, I'm much more likely than my neighbor newborn next to me, who did not have that family history, to have a similar substance use disorder. So there's a biological genetic predisposition in some folks, and I think we don't talk enough about that. There's actually that addiction is really a disease, and it's something we need to be thinking about, just like we would treat any other medical disease out there. So destigmatizing that's remarkably important. Additionally, we can think about trauma, something that's already been talked about on this stage tonight, right? Now, we've all been kids in this room at some point in time. What we sometimes forget is how little control kids have, particularly young kids. They don't get to control where they sleep, what they eat, where they go. We get a little more of that as we get into the sort of puberty and teenage years, but children might use substances to escape any trauma that they're experiencing because there's no physical escape. They can't hop in the car and go somewhere else. They can't have a parentectomy where they change the family. So instead, they might turn to drugs and alcohol in an effort to really escape or voluntarily dissociate, when you think about it, from the trauma that they may be experiencing, sort of saying, well, I'm not here, I'm gonna sort of numb myself and go somewhere else for a while. Something very important to think about. So we have family history and trauma that contribute. And additionally, I think it's important to think about social and peer histories. Again, we've all been kids. We probably remember what it's like to have peer pressure, right? As adults, we sometimes have peer pressure. So this idea of using drugs or alcohol to be cool, or using it out of curiosity to experiment, this is quite often a precipitant to substance use disorders down the road. And lastly, I just point to mental health disorders on the whole. We often talk about, when we treat substance disorders, it's very rarely exclusively a substance use disorder. Quite often, it's what we call a comorbid mental health disorder. In other words, we have one mental health disorder here alongside a substance use disorder. And as you might imagine, those symptoms can overlap and complicate each other quite a bit. And just like we use substances to avoid trauma, we might also use substances to avoid mental health symptoms or make them feel more manageable. And I think this is particularly important because when we think of, just drugs and alcohol, we often think of cannabis or, that kind of stuff. But we don't necessarily think about prescription medications, which is on the rise as a concern for children and adults. For example, if my son has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, it would be remarkably easy for him to get a prescription of Ritalin or Adderall, some kind of stimulant, psychostimulant medication that you can get from any primary care doctor or pediatrician. Trouble then becomes my child might have access to a medicine cabinet with a pill bottle with his name on it of drugs that could very easily be misused. And so we really want to be thinking, when we think about mental health disorders and addiction, really want to be thinking about individually tailoring any intervention according to each of these domains and more. And no two treatments should be alike because no two human beings are alike.
Very interesting that you raised, and I just did not really give this as much thought, I think, as I should have, as is the biological genetic predisposition. If you have a parent or two parents who drank every evening, and would you also, I'm thinking about the direct exposure, so as in the household, this becomes a normal part of the everyday, maybe that drink with dinner or after dinner or before dinner, whatever it might be. So does that also have an impact on these children as well? They see this as kind of a normal process in their household, and then they tend to maybe pick it up at whatever age?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be, right? I mean, no people's experiences are exactly identical, but I think we also need to be thinking a lot about, when we think about peer influence, that's not just necessarily the kids in school, but also what happens with peers or adults within the home, right? There's a large difference between a child who comes from a household in which substance use is normalized or even encouraged in some cases, right? And in which, it's not.
And I just want to add quickly, just because I'm thinking about it, would you say that you could add smoking to that as well? A smoking household? I mean, I grew up in, the 1960s in a smoking household. Both my parents smoked. That cocktail was normal when my dad got home from work. And everyone smoked in my family except for me. I did not pick it up. I just couldn't get past the taste. I tried it. But it's like, oh gosh, it's like I just couldn't get past the taste. So I count myself lucky that I did not take up smoking, because I know of so many people, including a family member who has had cancer as a result of it. So, but the same, you would say, right, with smoking?
Yeah, I would argue that, and I think it's even more concerning now because something that our kids have access to now is vaping. The senator's sort of saying, I stayed away from smoking because it wasn't a pleasant experience, maybe, right? Vaping, it comes in flavors. There's no burn, it's literally vaporizing. That's where the word vape comes from, right? So it's turning it into a water vapor. It's a more pleasant experience, I'm told, compared to smoking. And so some of those variables that actually kept kids safe are now actually no longer on the table.
Right, and here in Massachusetts, actually, we outlawed flavored cigarettes and flavored for vaping, but New Hampshire's not far away, and certainly online shopping, and it's still accessible to kids, especially to kids as well. Well, thank you. So having known, now that we know all this, how can parents communicate to their children in times of distress?
It's all about trust, right? And the question is, how do we build and foster that trust? I guess one disclaimer I'll put before I answer this question is I'm going to use the word parents or moms and dads, but I'm very mindful that we live in a world where parents are more than just moms and dads. Parents are often grandparents raising grandchildren, aunts, uncles, foster parents, step-parents, you name it. So when I refer to parents, please know I'm including all of you. This is something we do in therapy. Therapy's been something that's been addressed up here, and it's really, as I see it, the first and foremost, most important thing you can do, because if I'm going to go to a therapist, I need to know that I can trust that person. I need to know that I can be emotionally naked and vulnerable with this person and still be safe. So the question is, how do we do that in therapy, and is there a way parents can kind of do some of that too? One of the previous speakers used the term unconditional positive regard. This idea that no matter what you say here, I'm still going to love you, I'm still going to respect you, I'm not going to judge you. That's not what we're here to do. And so I think instilling that and encouraging that, sending anything you can do that sends that message to your children is wonderfully important. It's funny, you have to go to a lot of school to do what I do, but most of my wisdom comes from online social media memes. And I saw a meme recently, it's true. I saw a meme recently that it was a young girl, teenager, and she took a picture of a piece of paper that her father had written her, and she put it online and went viral. And the note, I'm going to paraphrase it, but it said something like, if you ever need me and you're worried I'm going to get upset with you, save this piece of paper and give it to me first. And then I promise I won't yell. So obviously a father who had done some soul searching, some self-reflection, who was pretty self-aware, knew what he brought to the table, and who sent a message to his daughter that it's okay. Your health and your safety comes first. You're not going to be in trouble. So anything you can do, I'm not saying do that exactly, but anything that you can do along those lines that sends a message to your kids that you're safe, you're going to be okay. That's huge. And I think there's gestures like that, but I also think it's the day-to-day. I think creating a home life where we feel emotionally vulnerable together, and that's okay. We talk about hardships. A life in which we spend quality, not just quantity time, but quality time, which usually means putting the cell phones and screens down, not to preach, but that's very important. time in which you're joining your children in their play or their enjoyable activities, whatever that is, where you're taking interest in them. One thing we do in therapy is what we call active listening, which is I'm not just hearing your problem so I can solve it. I really want to understand it so that I can help you through it. I really want to see it from your perspective. And sometimes that can even just look like reflective listening, which is, you just said this thing to me, let me say it back to you just to make sure I got it. And if I did, wonderful, you feel validated, we can move on. If I didn't, well, correct me. Let me know what I got wrong, because it's not about my ego. It's about supporting this person that I love and care about. So I think little things that you can do to send memos and messages like that are remarkably important. And the last thing I would just say is don't be afraid to seek professional help and support. I hear this from parents a lot. Dr. Rob, what if my kid's mad at me and that I dragged them to therapy to talk about their addictive behavior, et cetera. And, I would say two things to that. One is, well, there's a cliche, if your kid is never mad at you, are you actually parenting? And I think the parents in the room can probably understand that. So don't worry about that, they'll get over it. And number two, I would say is, wouldn't you rather be safe than sorry? I would much rather have my child upset with me and deal with the problem that's, proactively, rather than have a problem develop or worsen to a point where we can no longer control it. So seeking professional help is also remarkably important when needed.
And this is a perfect segue into our last question, is what resources are available to families?
So as we said, there's several pathways to mental illness and addictive behaviors. But I think the good news is there's even more pathways out of it. There's a lot of resources. I will cover some, but this will not be an exhaustive list, which is a good thing. It means there's a lot out there. So number one, as a psychologist, I'm going to put a plug out for seeking mental health support. This could be a psychologist like myself or a licensed mental health professional, somebody who's really trained to diagnose and treat substance use and mental health disorders. This could also be a psychiatrist or somebody who's certified and licensed to prescribe psychiatric medications. You can be talking to your primary care doctors or your pediatrician's offices. They often have resources available to people too. In addition, this doesn't just have to be individual therapy. It's that is absolutely helpful to a lot of people. We see that on TV a lot, where sort of a patient and a therapist are in the same room going back and forth. But it can also look like family therapy, where you're addressing family issues that are triggering substance use disorders. Or it can look like group therapy. A lot of people in this room are probably familiar with NA, Narcotics Anonymous, or AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. And I gotta tell you, I've done a lot of groups in my day, and most of what people will tell you is that, it's wonderful for the content, but what I really took from this experience was being in a room with people who get it, people who have been in my shoes, and it can be remarkably validating to hear a similar story and to hear that I'm not alone. And I think for somebody who is struggling, to see someone who's been in that position and has recovered can also be remarkably hope-inducing. And so that's certainly something that's available to people as well. A couple other ones I would just mention. I know I gotta yield my time soon. But we do have community mental health clinics that are cropping up and available. The senator mentioned that I'm the clinical director of psychiatry services at Mass General Brigham in Salem. One of the programs I'm remarkably proud of there, about a year ago, we got some funding from the state and the Fed to open up a bridge clinic, supporting patients to bridge them from not having any services to having services. And what I love about this program and ones like it is that if you have insurance, great, wonderful, we'll take it. If not, that's okay too. We recognize that you're a human being first. We'll figure out the rest. And so there are plenty of programs like that that are cropping up throughout the state that we'd recommend you take advantage of. And lastly, I would simply say that for some folks, the resources I've mentioned are not enough, and that's okay too. There are higher levels of care, like inpatient hospitalizations, partial hospitalization, day programs, intensive outpatient programs, and even residential programs where you have more 24/7 round-the-clock care and support. No two treatments should look alike, as I said. And I would recommend you consider all of these variables and all of these options to get the individualized care that you or a family member might need. So I know I have to go, but I will be at the table in the front if anybody would like to stop by after.
Thank you, Doctor. Wealth of information. We're so appreciative. Thank you. moving on to our third panel, we're going to be discussing mindfulness and mindset. Let me say that again. Mindfulness and mindset with Eric Brooks and Teresa Coughlin. Eric is an acupuncturist and herbalist, as well as a meditation teacher and yoga instructor. He has extensive background in studying mindfulness meditation over the last 15 years. Welcome. And Teresa Coughlin has been a registered nurse for over 15 years. She supports people wanting to make lifestyle changes by showing the power in nutrition, fitness, and mindset. And she also has 6+ years. She is 6+ years sober and leads a sober community in impactful sober wellness in living. Welcome to you both. Thank you. So Teresa, let me start with you. What is mindfulness?
Mindfulness. So for me, and what I teach and preach my clients and my babes and my sober community, it's really self-awareness to what we're doing in the everyday, and how it's truly helping me be 1% better, right? I think it's focusing on who am I surrounding myself with? What am I doing every single day that's really adding to me feeling and being my best self? And that mindset of, I don't know what it's going to look like, but I don't want to sit in this anymore. I think when, especially when I first got sober, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't feel worthy of a better, right? But I just knew I didn't want this, and I needed something different, and I was aware of that. And having that mindset and the self-awareness to ask for help and put yourself in uncomfortable, healthy situations, that's gonna force you to really grow and change and believe, almost be what I say, like delusional into something different for your life, and having a purpose, right? I want to get up every day, and it didn't start like this when I first got sober, but it's turned into realizing that I need to get up every day and have some kind of purpose for myself, and to also be able to serve others in that aspect.
Thank you so much. And Eric, same question. In your practice, in your life, what is mindfulness?
Of course, thank you. So I agree with Teresa. Mindfulness is really about cultivating that self-awareness. And I think it's one of those things that we don't recognize, that our mind tends to kind of narrate itself, and we're not really paying attention to that story that the mind is creating. We sort of take it for granted. So whether that's a negative story, a lot of negative self-talk, not just conceptually, but also the emotional side of things, we're never taking the time to just step back from that and gain the self-awareness to see that. So part of the mindfulness practice is to direct your attention maybe to something else for a moment, to step outside that narrative. So it might be your breath, right? Maybe just following the one inhalation and exhalation and just noticing the sort of pause that's there. And it takes you out of the full narrative, the story that you're telling yourself, the movie that's kind of in your head narrating. And when you do that, you get a fresh perspective. Now you can kind of look at your experience, what you're taking for granted, and it gives you an opportunity to maybe direct it in a new way, finding healthier ways to cultivate different aspects of your mind. And so when I think about mental health, I think about also in the terms of, like, if you think about physical health, in physical health, you're not just exercising and strength training your muscles, right? There's cardio, there's flexibility, so there's different aspects to physical health, and there's different aspects to our mental health, right? Thinking about maybe where we place our attention, where do we spend our time attending to things, right? That's something we can train the mind to do, right? If we're constantly on the phone, if we're constantly distracting the mind, well, let me come back into this present moment. Let me just listen to the space that's in this room, listen to the breath that I have, right? I can attend to things in that way. Looking at my thoughts, right? Are my thoughts constantly in this self-negative story? Well, maybe I start cultivating healthier thought patterns, reading healthier, books that inspire me, thinking about my emotional states, right? Anger, aggression, those aren't really pleasant states to be in. But those emotional states are things that we can cultivate and work on. So if I start practicing thinking about more things like love and compassion, understanding of others, they're just feel much better than the normal states of just aggression. So those are things that in the practice of mindfulness, recognizing you have ability to train your mind in healthier ways. And so that's how I would sort of understand the practice of mindfulness.
You brought up breathing, which is so incredibly important. Sometimes when you're just feeling overwhelmed in the moment, whatever it might be, a task in front of you, whatever it is, and to be able to stop and just breathe, and how that really brings that anxiety right down. I do it pretty consistently, especially when I'm commuting into Boston. It's a tough commute. I'm late for a meeting, and I'm getting all tensed up, and I'll say, oh, okay, here comes the anxiety, and I just have to remember to breathe, and it really helps so immensely. So thank you for bringing that up in particular, and telling us about mindfulness. Teresa, what are some of the tools for mindfulness, and how can you apply those to daily life?
Sure. I can't say I do breath work at all, or yoga. I probably haven't stretched since like 2013. But I'm a gym girl. If I am having a bad day, a good day, a hard day, an easy day, get to the gym, right? It doesn't matter how old you are or where you are in life or your athletic ability, any of that. My tool is always, it has not always been, it has been to get to the gym. I've learned the power of the gym and nutrition and mindset to truly build me to be that 1% better. The you versus you mentality of it's me versus me, but that community sensation of, even in the sobriety community, it's me versus me being 1% better, but for sure I want the person next to me to do is just as good, right? Same thing with the gym mentality as well. And having mindfulness in the power of that. So again, a little bit thicker of my story, when I graduated college, I weighed 89 pounds. I had a severe eating disorder. And it went into my adulthood, even as a nurse. And I really I just turned 40 2 weeks ago, and I really didn't start healing from my eating disorder when I was like 30. And I didn't really start working out till I was like 31. So for me, the power of the gym hasn't been something that's always been my tool. It's something I ended up learning because another nurse saw that I needed some help. And she was like, I go to this gym, I think you should just come with me. And I went and I saw these women lifting, deadlifting, and benching, and I was like, I want to be strong like them. And the coach was like, you gotta eat something. And that was like the turning point. And I was drinking a lot at that time. So at the same time, I was trying to find this external validation and figure out how to make sense of the nutrition and the fitness while still drinking and numbing the lack of confidence and the lack of self-esteem and just not feeling good about myself. And then really putting that all together once I got sober and realized it was a me thing, right? I needed to figure out where's the power within me? Where is my self-love? Where is my confidence? Where is my strength coming from, right? That's when the nutrition and fitness stuff really kind of clicked because, again, going back to I never had gratitude. I didn't find positivity in life. Especially when I was drinking, but then when you get sober, especially in the beginning, you're just like, I don't even know what I'm feeling anymore or how to go through life not being able to numb these things. And learning the power of mindset and the gratitude and the self-positive talk and switching that, all of those things, right? Everything started to become a little bit clearer of like, this is for me, right? It's not healthy nutrition as a punishment. It's not getting to the gym as a punishment. I'm building me. I'm building a stronger me, a more powerful me. If I'm more powerful, I can make the next girl more powerful and the next guy more powerful, right? And then it's realizing that those are powerful tools when I'm not having a good day, right? Think about it. When you're not having a good day, we eat poorly or we don't go to the gym, right? Those are the days we have to show up. And learning the power of those things and finding a community within that as well kind of gives you that accountability to show up. And that's really what's helped for me have a stronger mindset and just being a healthier version of myself, but also a healthier version of me in sobriety. Another great tool that I still use 6.5 years later is called the 5-minute journal. And it's called just exactly that. And what I like about it is, like, again, I'm not like holistic, I don't journal. It gives you prompts of what to journal for the day, and it takes 5 minutes. And when I first found it, a woman that I was following on social media, she's married to a big CrossFit trainer. She had posted about it, and I was like, if Heather's doing this, I'm gonna do anything Heather's doing. And then I got it, and I was like, this book is stupid. And I brought it to my therapist, and I was like, I'm not doing this. This thing is stupid, because it makes you write down 3 positive things, 3 things you're grateful for, an affirmation. I was like, I have nothing to be grateful for, and I don't like myself, so how am I gonna do this? And he was like, let's give it 30 days, force it, see what happens, right? And it took more than 30 days, but I could see doing it. It was changing how I was thinking about myself. It was making me look at gratitude, even small, stupid things, right? Even to this day, I use it on my good days and my bad days, and I'm not sitting there for the affirmation being like, I am strong, I am beautiful. There are days that I wake up and I was like, girl, you need some extra help today. And I'll Google it, just like we Google everything, and I'll Google what I need for the day. Like if I'm having a bad body image day, I will Google positive body affirmations. If I'm having a difficult day with my sobriety, I will Google sobriety affirmations, right? And it's such a powerful tool because like Eric said, it's about changing that dialogue, right? We're all tired, we all struggle. We all have things, life things. It's finding that 1% better. How can every day I wake up and I have to stay sober? I have a choice not to. I choose to stay sober, right? Every day I also have a choice to get up and say, how am I going to be just 1% better than I was yesterday? What does that mean? Does that mean I'm gonna respect my body and take a rest day because I've been working out really hard? Does it mean that I'm gonna treat myself because I have been eating really well? Does it mean that I need to get back on track on eating well because I haven't been eating well? Or maybe it's my 1% better is like, you've been lacking at the gym, just go and do 30 minutes, feel strong. And then it's connecting that mindset to it of like, not just checking off the boxes, really being like, how am I unplugging from the chaos and the negativity and how I feel and truly plugging into myself? Again, that's so powerful about the gym. I put my headphones in, it's me versus me. Nothing else matters, right? And connecting that versus I went to the gym today, I ate well today, I wrote in my journal today. It's like really understanding the power of it versus checking off boxes.
That's really amazing. You know, I'm listening to you and I'm hearing you've gone from powerless to powerful. You use the word power a lot and it really shows. So thank you for sharing and happy birthday.
Thank you.
And that's right, happy birthday. And Eric, what are some of the tools that you use in mindfulness and how to apply them to daily life?
Of course. So I try to find moments of mindfulness throughout the day, right? One, just taking that breath in the middle of the day, a chaotic day in work, taking that moment just to reset myself with that one single breath. Hopefully I can spend a little bit longer than just one breath, maybe it's a couple breaths. But even in my daily life, I find anything is an opportunity for mindfulness. You know, standing at the sink, washing dishes, right? How present are you with that? Just take a moment and look at your own mind. Are you constantly in the state of these thoughts that are flooding in, or are you just fully present with the activity of the washing the dishes? Folding the laundry, same sort of thing, right? Throughout the day, we have these opportunities we sort of take for granted. We're constantly distracting the mind with something, right? We feel a need that we need something else than just what's present. And so you can find these moments throughout the day, and it really helps to kind of reset ourselves. When we're in that sort of chaotic state of just frustration and we feel like, no, I really need to just buy into this frustration I'm having, I'll use the example of my son who's 2 years old throwing a temper tantrum. Just in this extreme emotional state of frustration. And you know, as much as I can reason with him, try to talk him out of it, what seems to work is just by picking him up, taking him out of the space that's causing him the frustration, bringing him outside and just being like, hey, wait, What's that sound? What's that over there? And it breaks that sort of state that he's in, right? It breaks that sort of narrative, whatever his little 2-year-old mind is thinking, right? It breaks that sort of state, and he brings himself into the present moment to listen. And it stops his crying, right? There's something about just becoming present, allowing that space to grow, that's just much more satisfying than being in the story that we're in. So I find that throughout our day, we can constantly practice this thing in any situation that we're in, right? The other important thing with the mindfulness thing is recognizing the mind-body connection, right? So what I do as a profession is I'm an acupuncturist, and I see this a lot with people, is that sometimes, right, we don't have that ability to regulate our mind, partially because our physical state is in such a state of imbalance, right? We might be eating poorly, we might be suffering from some sort of physical imbalance, and that can create a lot of mental agitation. So it's also mindful of the sense of where can I seek out ways to improve that state of my being, right, the physical side. And so we do a lot of work with acupuncture to help regulate the person's tension that they're holding on to, right, the tension that's in the nervous system. There's whole protocols that are used for PTSD and smoking and addiction, all has to do with the vagus nerve and the regulation that we have in the ear. So there's things that you can do to help regulate those things and create that sense of balance. And part of it is just being mindful to the process between the mind and the body, how these two are speaking to one another. So these are the tools that I use, right? There's that sense of just finding any opportunities throughout the day, taking care of myself with things like yoga, massage, right? The physical side of our experience, being mindful to the needs that those things need, diet, nutrition. So that's what I tend to do.
Wonderful, thank you. You know, I have, I'm thinking about this in my life, and you know, a pretty packed day every day. I was in the State House today and started the day early. But I think about when I'm home, and I have 3 30-somethings, and I'm a grandmother, so congratulations on your 2-year-old. I've got a 9-month-old grandson and a 3-year-old granddaughter. I gush, sorry, had to just do that. But you know, my youngest daughter, who lives in our in-law apartment, she'll come talk to me and say, "Mom, how was your day?" And I've got the phone right here, and oh, it was good. Yep, it was great. So, Mom, what'd you do today? Honey, hang on one second. And she goes, "Mom, can you put that down and talk to me?" And I do. And I go, "I am so sorry. I'm not giving you the attention that you deserve." And I put it down and I say, "Let's have the conversation." I've had to be really intentional about it. It's like, not like, "Can you give me 5 minutes?" Nope, it goes down right then. Because we're so distracted by so many things in our lives, especially, you know, whether it's social media, whether, you know, we are glued to our devices, at least I am. And so thank you for sharing and really, you know, bringing us back to being mindful and really paying attention to that person, your 2-year-old, taking him outside and saying, "Hey, what did you hear?" You know, and bringing him back into the moment. It's really wonderful. And going from powerless to powerful, really amazing. I want to thank you both so very, very much to be here tonight to share this with our audience. Thank you. And moving to our next panel, this panel discussion is on addiction. And we have 3 panelists with us. Mike Licoli is president co-founder of Danvers Wellness Center by Soul Warrior. He's a holistic coach who works with people on processing and healing trauma in a physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual way. He's had his own struggles in his past, and welcome, Mike. We also have Maddie Powers. Maddie is the CEO and co-founder of Chelsea's House and Power of Recovery. Chelsea's House was started a decade ago as a 6-bed sober home and now offers 12 houses throughout the greater Boston area and supports over 200 men and women daily. And we have with us someone very well known to me, Michelle Lipinski. Michelle Muffet Lipinski is the founder principal of North Shore Recovery High School, located right here in Beverly. She has been a teacher, principal director, special ed director, and superintendent, and she's got 25 years of experience. She speaks across the country about addiction, especially in the adolescent world, and and in academic settings. And she's been featured on ABC, CNN, NBC, NEC, and Anderson Cooper. Michelle, I did not know this about you. What I do know about Michelle is we work very closely together because she is the principal at the Recovery High School, and I, in the Senate, support the Recovery High School, all of the Recovery High Schools across Massachusetts, to be able to educate our students who are struggling with addiction. And Michelle will tell her story and her experience. We were talking about it earlier before we started. I couldn't support this school more. They really do God's work. And I get to go to their graduation every year and see these students graduate and go on to live good lives with supports along the way, because we all need supports along the way. So, Mike, let me start with you. What changed? And what was your why to change? That make sense?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go
Thank
for
you.
it.
My why came from a very traumatic event that happened in my life. And not too long ago, I'd say about maybe 4 years ago or so, 4.5 years ago. And it was an event in my life that caused me to reflect back and take a look at my behavior from when I was a teenager, even prior to that, till time now. And what ended up happening was it caused me to ask the question of, why do I keep choosing the same person, but just in a different body and relationship? And that caused me to look a little deeper and ask the next question of, well, what's the common denominator in all my relationships? I realized it was me. So it was that deep dive, look in the mirror, and on the other side of the coin, of course, it was them, but that's their stuff. This became me, a complete reflection of who I am, why am I behaving in such a way, why am I seeking attention, why am I looking for validation, why am I looking for approval? I'm looking for all of these things on an external level, and I realized none of it was ever going to satisfy me until I satisfied myself, until I felt that I was enough for who I was. I realized, looking back, I was completely disconnected in my life. I've used every substance under the sun to self-soothe, to escape, to try to fix my problems, and it became a realization that I was the issue, and I had to basically fix me and fix the way I thought. My core belief system was that I didn't believe in myself, and I had to flip that around. So that became my why.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your journey. Maddie, what got you here? What made you choose addiction? What's your story?
I'm a recovering drug addict myself, and what got me into recovery, I found myself standing in a parking lot December 28th in a wife beater, shorts, and flip-flops with $36 for a 40 bag, and I knew I had to beg some kid for $4. And he could talk to me however he wanted, I just needed what he had. And I was okay with that way of living for a long time, and that day just hit me different. I was done. So I checked myself in for the 1,000th time, but there was no bolt of lightning, no act of God, no none of that. I just stayed. And that was 14 years ago. And we got into, and then just little by slow, we got into sober homes. And it really wasn't me, it was my older brother. And him and my other brother, we used to check me into these houses where you just pay money and they didn't care what you're doing. I was still using, selling, active lifestyle. and it didn't matter as long as the rent was paid every week. And they had a different idea. It was like a family-style living. And I was still caught up. And I'd say, it never worked. Well, we're going to put TVs in every room. I go, we'll steal them. We're going to do this. We'll do this. That was over 200 beds in 12 houses ago. So, like, it works. You treat a man like a man, he'll act like a man. You treat a woman like a woman, she'll act like a woman. Treat them less than, they'll act less than. So, which then got us into power of recovery, treatment. We're into the sober houses for about 10 years. We've seen that we could change a little, tweak a little bit in PHPs and IOPs, and we carry that same attitude with this new business. And like, that took off. So I got here pretty much from using heroin. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your journey. And you have turned that into helping many, many others through opening these sober homes and helping people be able to overcome their addiction. Thank you. Michelle, what made you start the school and what has happened in your life?
So, first of all, Joan, I never heard your story before. And as a person who was also sexually assaulted as a 6-year-old, like, I just want to acknowledge how much I appreciate you sharing that story, because like my damaged 6-year-old self like completely identified with you. So I just know there's people in the audience that needed to hear this. I needed to hear this. And so I've always loved you, but now like 1,000 times more. So, and I don't even live in Massachusetts. Like, I can't even vote for fucking her. I can't vote for her. That sucks. Vote for her. Anyway, I've just been kind of thinking about that, and I'm really, thank you for sharing that. What got me here? So I was a science teacher, and back in 1997, and No Child Left Behind, they thought it was a really good idea to pass something called an attendance policy. Do you guys know what that is? Keeping sicker kids sicker. Like, it's a way to like really keep the most vulnerable students away from like actually getting a diploma. And I say that publicly, and I'm sure there's educators out there that are going to throw shit at me, but that's okay. So then I had to fail a bunch of my students, and so I went to my building principal, and I said, hey, I did some research, and I really feel like a lot of the students that I failed would benefit from an alternative school. And you know what he said to me? He goes, I don't want to lose a good teacher to those kids. Like, I am those kids. Like, I have an ACEs score of 8. Like, for all intents and purposes, I shouldn't be here right now. So I was like, oh, well, that's not gonna work. So I went above his head of the superintendent, which the principals really love that, by the way. So, and he gave me the permission to go ahead and start the alternative school, which I started in the small engines room of Salem High School with 200 small engines while I had a one-month-old baby. So anyway, it was a good time. But back in 2006, this thing hit called OxyContin in 2005, 2006. So like, as an administrator in alternative school, like, you used to be able to smell addiction, right? You smell weed, you smell alcohol. They didn't have pills. So this one kid, he came in, he had a backpack, and my superintendent said, when you start the school, there's 2 things. Get him to graduation, and don't end up on the front page of the Salem Evening News. This is a story, by the way. And so, long story short, I found out that this kid had about $20,000 of OxyContin in his backpack. I didn't know what it was. I went and looked it up. I started doing some research on it, and I was like, holy hell, we have a problem. So I went to my superintendent, Herb Levine, at that time, and I said, Herb, we have a problem here. And then by this time, I saw some of my students were losing their parents, they were losing their siblings, and I saw the face of addiction, like, it just changed. A lot of my girls were stripping. And I was like, what is going on here? And I was checking kids for track marks. Like, mind you, I have 2 master's degrees, and nobody ever said, oh, by the way, get them to graduation and check them for track. Like, that didn't happen. And so I went to my superintendent again, not finally, one day he came to me and he said, I have a son who is addicted and we got to figure this out. So he helped me start the first recovery high school in Massachusetts, here in Beverly, which was one of the only places that would let me start a recovery high school, by the way, because a lot of the other local districts didn't want a recovery high school in their back. So I started it. I made every mistake in the entire book, and I still make mistakes all day long. But really, we're really trying to find a way to find a developmentally appropriate model to work with adolescents who need substance use support. Did that answer your question?
It did, but I have more.
Oh, God.
So I remember you told me a story, or the philosophy at your school, and you've told me stories, is that if you're going to, a public high school and you show up under the influence, they won't let you in. But if you show up at your school, you won't let them leave.
Right. So Joan's been there before when there's, so during Thanksgiving, Joan comes every single year. We call it Gratitude with Attitude. And the students write a gratitude piece. And, we're very encompassing. Like, we love our students. We radically love our students. And we tell them that. And so how can you love somebody and know that they're sick because they have a diagnosed substance use disorder, and then be like, you need to leave? Like, that doesn't feel really responsible or right. So what we do is we love them more when they're sick, so we can help get them someplace that's safer. So if we send them home, we know what's going to happen, right? When you suspend somebody who's doing something, they're going to go home, they're going to do more of it. That's not rational to me. So what we do is we try to encompass them with love, support, empathy, compassion, and everything we have, and really try to add more to them. And it's not that if I have to take them to the hospital, I will. I don't be like, okay, we're going to triage this kid right now, Narcan, and we're doing, like, we take care of them, but we also, we don't kick kids out for relapse. We add more supports.
Right, and sometimes you do have to, though, they have to go
We
in.
do Section 35s all day long. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So that you're putting students into a safe place so that they can overcome, that moment of their addiction and return back to school.
Absolutely, if they have a space, but we won't go there.
Right, so Michelle and I talk often about budget and transportation, which is always an issue. How do you get kids to and from the school? I mean, sometimes kids are coming from far away. They're not coming from, these local communities. And how do you get them to the school to keep them safe?
Right.
I do enjoy going for Thanksgiving, and all of the students, I believe, write something from their heart. Some of them read their essays, some don't, but the teachers do. Yeah. I've saved them all, by the way.
Have you?
I have, every single copy, and because they're beautiful. These are really thoughts coming from the deepest, darkest, sometimes areas of of their life, from these students. I learned so much from them, and I'm so grateful that to be able to come to the school and support you and for the work that you do. And so, Mike, I want to come back to you. And what made you did talk about what was your change, and now, you work in this field. Tell us about your work.
It's kind of morphed over the years. Started off as a personal trainer, nutrition consultant over a decade and a half ago. From there, it was getting into the healing work, but having it done on me, things like Reiki and energy work. And it felt like it worked. I was working with coaches, I was working with therapists, I was feeling a little bit better, but it was never going to that immersive place, that dark place that lives inside every single one of us. We call it the shadow in our industry, right? And you fast forward, and what I've done over the last few years or so is really tackle that shadow self of mine. That place where when you look in the mirror, it's those things that you don't like about yourself. You could sit there and ask that question, well, how do you feel about yourself today? I think I'm pretty good. No, stop. Let it sit, be there with it, and you'll start to feel those emotions start to rise up to the surface. You'll start to see that there are pieces of yourself that you don't like. And those are the things where we wear masks that we need to uncover. So it's that process of going into that deep immersive place, that dark place. So the way I work with clients today is very much similar to how I tackled my healing, is getting to that place, to that core wound, to those core pieces of our trauma, to understand them, ask why they're there, where did they stem from. But not only that, we have to realize that trauma does live in the body. Science has proven this. On a cellular level, it is stored in the body. So when we even talk about ancestral healing, where we're talking about how DNA is passed forward from, mother and father to son, daughter, whomever it is, passed on through that lineage, that is stored there. So some of the things that we may be even born with, wired with, may not have even been ours to deal with, but it's our turn to break the cycle. So that's the way I work with my clients. It's very similar to the way I went through my healing process.
Great, thank you so much. Maddie, what keeps you on track with your choice to stay sober and clean? So you talked about your experience, you talked about that day, that winter day. And so on a daily basis, what are your thoughts and how do you share that with your clients?
Well, it's real. Once it hits you, it's simple. Either you're going to wake up and use, or you're going to wake up and stay clean. If you just keep it that simple, like, do I want to be clean more than I want to be high? What happens is you get clean with nothing, and then you gain little responsibility, a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. Like, right now, today in my life, using is not an option. Like, do I think of it? Absolutely. I'm an addict. I'm always going to think of it. But it's so much less than it was when I first started. And what keeps me on track is responsibility. And I keep it all the way at the front of my head that no matter what's going on, I cannot pick up no matter what. Because if I'm having a bad day today and I pick up, how bad is my day after? How bad's my Thursday? I had to think what day of the week it was. How bad is my Thursday going to be? So I always look at it this way. I can have a bad day and sleep inside, or a bad day and sleep outside. You know, it's only gonna create more problems. And working in recovery and having these places, it does keep you on your toes. A, you see what you don't want to feel like, and B, how can I fall off talking to this kid, telling him to stay up? Like, it's a lot of responsibility. I surround myself with other guys in recovery. I'm always talking to them. You got to get over the fact that we were raised wrong. Like, you got to keep it in. You can't cry. You can't show emotion. You can't show weakness. Like, that's all bullshit. Can I say that? It's all bullshit.
You can say that.
You broke it? She owns a school. I can say it. All right. That's the only way to get better. Is once you're physically detoxed, it's an inside job. You know, after, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 days, you're not going to get any cleaner. So it's an inside job. It's mental and spiritual. Does it work every day? No, I'm batshit crazy half the time. But I'm clean, you know? I'm clean. And I don't know. It's just, it becomes a routine where, like, I don't want to use. I have no cravings to use. My two children help me out. I have an 11-year-old boy and a 10-year-old girl who've never seen me drink or drug, and I plan on keeping it that way. So I can't go use tonight and try and wake them up for school at 6:30 tomorrow morning because I won't be around. Like, they depend on me. It's a good feeling to come from where I came from, where nobody depended on me for anything, like nothing. I was useless to everybody, to being depended upon. Like, something simple that may seem simple to you, like, oh, you got to wake two kids up and drive them to school. It's a big thing. I couldn't do that 15 years ago. I wasn't capable to drive. Nobody would drive with me, first off. Second off, I wasn't up at 6:30 in the morning unless I was still up from the night before. And B, I didn't have a house to wake up in. So, like, you got to look at it like that.
Powerful. Thank you. Michelle, I want to raise something that is a really hard part of what you do, and that is when some of your students succumb to an overdose, or graduates. I've been to many graduations where you're honoring some students that died, seniors perhaps, that died that year. I remember one particular graduation, and the whole church was crying. The students, it was probably one of the roughest experiences for me, and I didn't know the person. Can you share? I know it's hard.
No, I think in this world, I mean, on the stage, that's our life. Like, this is what we live. It becomes part of our job, and that sounds crazy, but I am so honored to have been a part of their lives, no matter how short or long it's been. And honestly, I've seen you grieve next to me, and thank you for that. And we've lost 35 students in the past 8 years. And I have a staff who, when things go badly, we cling to one another, like literally cling to one another. And so we are so grateful to have one another to lift each other up. And it just furthers my resolve to change this broken system. Because a lot of the kids die because they don't have the right insurance. A lot of the kids die because they don't have access to treatment. So we got to figure that out, guys. So that furthers my resolve to start new things, Joan, and work with
we're talking
public
about
health to start to and do more trainings in schools. Do more trainings in schools because this is where it starts, man. 97% of people start picking up in high school or even before, and start those patterns really early on. If we can catch them early when they're jumping in the well versus down the river, we're going to be able to save lives. And that's where we need to figure that out. Like, we have the opportunity. We know what it looks like, and I see cardinals all the time. Do you guys believe in this? Like, I'm such a sap. Like, I see cardinals and I'm like, oh, that's Danny. Oh, that's Sean. Oh, that's Haley. You know, like, I see cardinals and like they're my former students. And they're everywhere. Like, they're just everywhere. So I really truly believe I'm honored and blessed. And a lot of the parents, I'm one of their first few phone calls when they pass away, and I'm honored to stand alongside of them and help them walk through this horrible process. But that becomes something that's what I do now, because we're in an opioid crisis and people are dying. So, yeah.
Thanks, Michelle.
Sure.
Thank you for sharing. And Mike and Maddie, I'm sure you've seen your share as well of losing friends, perhaps loved ones, and you've found your paths to recovery and to help people. Same with Michelle. And I'm honored to be on this stage here with you to discuss this. Because it's a part of our trauma. Everyone probably in this audience has had some trauma or knows someone who's had a trauma. And it stays with you, and there's help in various forms. Whether you have suffered from an addiction, there's help. Whether you have whatever it might be, there's help. And that's what's important, is to talk about this, to push that stigma aside, you know, to be, Mike, you and I were talking earlier, and we were talking about, that, family, you're from an Italian family, and the message was, put that away. Don't talk about it. We don't talk about those things. Tell us a little bit about that.
That's how I grew up. It was, my mother looking at me and basically like, don't tell anybody though. Nobody needs to know. You shove it down deep. And our generation was brought up like that. And I'm going to speak from a male perspective too. It becomes that much more of a stigma to even have a problem that you can't fix on your own. You can't reach out to the person next to you and say, hey, I'm struggling, because guess what? I'm not supposed to be. I'm a guy. I'm supposed to have all the solutions. I'm supposed to be able to take care of these problems. And from that perspective, man, I hid behind every drug, alcohol, food, sex, you name it, gambling, whatever it was, even bodybuilding and powerlifting. I mean, I immersed myself into that arena for several years. And when I look back, I realized that that was even addiction, because I wasn't understanding it. And yeah, it was all because it stemmed back to that, like, don't tell anybody. So now I'm trying to figure it out on my own. I don't have a lot of guidance at the time. I have nobody telling me, go this way or do this, or maybe that'll work, or that. I had nobody. So it took me years to figure it out on my own, for the simple fact that our generation was brought up not to talk about anything. So
That's absolutely right. And that's why we talk so often about stigma and how to remove the stigma, and have these conversations like this tonight, so that we can know that if you've had a trauma in your life, you can talk about it. Talk about it with your therapist, with a friend, a loved one. Just know that You can talk about it with me, talk about it with anyone up here or any of these panelists. We're all here to help, whether we're from the government side, whether we're from the treatment side, the mindfulness side, the yoga side, whatever it might be. We're all here to help each other. And so I want to thank you to this panel for sharing your deepest journeys with us, how you have dealt with it, and how you're also helping people. So thank you so very, very much.
Thank you.
And we are running on time, so this is wonderful. And I think, are the rest of the panelists coming out? Because we're going to do a Q&A. We're going to have the audience members. If anybody has any questions, any stories you want to share. And now I'm looking for a little guidance of, oh, here we go. For folks to come and ask some questions. We have our prior panelists right here in front of us. And we have right here with there we go, with a microphone. That's what I'm holding in my hand. I'm trying to get the word out, microphone. So please, does anyone have any questions, anything that they would like to share with us? We're all here to learn from each other. And I think we do have a question. And here we go.
Hello, testing. Hello. Thank
Hi
you
there.
to everyone for being on the panel tonight. My name is Erin Ronder-Neves. I am a birth doula, and I work at I'm opening up Beyond Birthing, which is a prenatal and postpartum support center here in Beverly. Thanks, friends. Something that, Michelle, that you brought up that's sticking with me a lot is that we have to break the cycle before it starts. And, that's why I have such a passion for maternal mental health, because research shows that if you take care of the mother or if you take care of the parent, then they will take better care of their children or their charges. And I am wondering what we can do as a community to stop being reactive and start being proactive. And I just kind of wanted to put that out there to you guys as well as our previous panelists, because I feel we are in such a society, especially with insurances and all of these things, that we are very reactive instead of proactive, which is why I'm really focusing on the mother and the parent and the birthing person, so we can really start it there to help, again, break that cycle before it begins. But I'd just love to know your thoughts on that kind of topic. Thank you so much.
So much to say. I think it starts off by letting people know what a substance use disorder looks like in adolescence and have more screening tools readily available and not in a gotcha moment. I think it's really important for kids to know, like, here's what the craft looks like. And if you have 4 out of 6, you're 80% most likely to be walking yourself into a substance use disorder. It's not shame, it's not stigma, it's just facts. So we have so much of these scare tactics. Let's put people on stages and tell people, like, instead of just giving them scientific data that says, hey, you might have a substance use disorder and this is what it looks like. I think we could start off with having bad policies in our schools that keep kids sick. But I'm going to defer to the rest of these brilliant people. By the way, I am the least healthy human when I'm looking at you all, by the way. Because seriously, I got a lot of work to do. So anyway, go ahead.
Okay. I think adding to that too is educating the parents at that point on what substance abuse looks like, but then digging a little deeper and having those parents maybe look at how that child was raised. Was it a symptom of environment? What was it a symptom of? Is it wiring? Is it the way they were brought into this world? What caused that? And educating the parents that it's not their fault per se, and it's okay in a way to realize, like, hey, you need to take a look at yourself. As their parents, you need to take a look at yourselves and see what potentially could have caused that and why did they get to that point. So make it okay.
I'd hop in there as well. Thanks, Mike. It's a really important question. I think one thing parents sometimes forget is that it's not our job as parents to have all the answers, right? I think parents sometimes feel like, if I don't know how to handle this, I'm doing something wrong. And I would reframe that to say it's our job as parents to find the right answers for our kids when they need help, even if it's not coming from us directly. And the other thing I would add is, Mike, you kind of alluded to this. Kids look to the adults in their lives, often the parents, as role models. They look to us and they learn, how do I cope, right? They don't necessarily ask that question. But if they see a parent struggling, whether it's with a substance use disorder or with work stress or partner stress or any stress, they might look to that parent to also see how they overcome that adversity, whether it's taking deep breaths, doing some mindfulness, doing some yoga, going for a walk, using a communication strategy, etc. So using some of those skills, I think kids don't always learn by what we say to them, but they often learn by what we do and show them. So I would advise taking care of yourself as parents is a wonderful way to take care of your children.
Thank you. Wonderful, and thank you for your work as a doula. Thank you so very much. Your work is so very important, so thank you. Any other questions? It's a little hard for us to see with these lights. I've never really been on stage before. I feel like I'm on stage. We are on stage, but here you go. I digress.
Hello, everyone. I appreciate the responses, but frankly, I appreciate the question even more, because I'm going to rephrase it in a different way. Because you all responded to about parents after they have kids, and then something happens, and then something. I think what we were getting at, and my work not as a clinician or a fitness professional, hi Tara, hi Jill, hey Mike, is what do we do as a community, I can't speak suddenly, right? Before parents even are parents, before people move to Beverly or the North Shore, how do we respond? How do we come together as a community, right? This is a community conversation to bring mental health and everything that comes with it to the forefront so that we are all healthier. It's a big question.
Thank you for that. You're absolutely right. So we do start here tonight, right here in this community conversation where we do talk, we share experiences, we talk to each other. I like where you were going with what happens, wait a minute, before you're a parent. We're all shaped by our experiences, as the doctor said. As children, what we see, our environment that we grow up in. Not everybody's family environment is the same. I work closely with the Plummer Home. It's now called Plummer Youth Promise. Does everyone know what that is? It's over in Salem. It's a beautiful, well, it's an old structure. She'll be beautiful again. But it was an orphanage back in the 1800s for boys who didn't have families. And it still services boys at that location, but it's actually grown into many states. Other states, and so what was that experience that these boys ended up homeless, without families? And so I think it's, and I just use that as an example. We all come from very different backgrounds and experiences growing up, and this is where here we are, we're sharing trauma as adults, but how do we prevent that? So I'm trying to prevent child sexual abuse. In my work in the Senate, so that we're preventing it. We're not dealing with it afterwards and having now lifelong therapy. We're preventing it by asking our adults, particularly our educators and and anyone that works with youth, to know what to look for if they see a child because it shows up. It's there. For me, it was stomach aches. Boy, my stomach ached my whole adolescence. My parents took me from doctor to doctor to figure out, why does their stomach hurt? Because I was being sexually abused. So anyway, thank you for the question. You're absolutely right. How do we stop that before we get here? but we are here, but we're talking about how do we stop that before we get here. So thank you. Anybody else?
I can add to it.
Yes.
I think, like we said, one of the biggest things is having these conversations, right? Stepping into the discomfort, identifying the discomfort, normalizing that we are all here in experience, and there is no guidebook. There is no one way, there's no right way, there is no set linear way to figure this out, and normalizing that. Giving people the space to step in and say, whew, this is uncomfortable, I have no idea what I'm doing. Do you have any idea what you're doing? You don't either? Let's shimmy it out together. Let's talk about it. Let's be uncomfortable. Oh, my face is cringing. I'm tight. My stomach's upset. These are all things that are a part of my experience. And instead of just pushing them down, letting that be real, honoring that, validating it, and really leaning in and saying, you know what, I don't need to be alone because we're not alone, right? We are in a community. We are in a space that we are all dealing with things. They don't look the same, they don't feel the same, but we are each here in this experience. So I really think that leaning into the discomfort, leaning on each other, building these opportunities for these conversations, sitting down, listening to things that it's like, I don't really want to hear it. I know in my mental health work, we talk a lot about suicidality. And there's so much concern of, if I bring it up, is someone going to say that they're feeling it? If you bring it up, it doesn't change if that person's feeling it or not. But bringing it up might empower them to be able to step into the discomfort and then feel held and supported and cared for, which is really what we need, right? To feel held, supported, and cared for when we feel like we are treading water. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, you bring up suicide. It's such a difficult topic to talk about. A dear friend took his life just a few months ago, and he left behind a beautiful fiancée who we knew he seemed off in the wintertime, just didn't know how bad it was. And it's difficult, but it has to be talked about. It has to be talked about, and we do. There's an organization called the NAN Project. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it, but NAN was a young woman who, at 26, as she was just a month away from completing her master's degree, and took her life. And her mother and her brother formed the NAN Project, and now the NAN Project is in high schools all across Massachusetts, and Department of Higher Ed has asked that they now go onto college campuses as well. And it's a peer mentor, so it's a peer-to-peer mentor where students are checking in on students, and they're being taught how to do it, and they're talking about it, and to prevent from someone from taking their life who otherwise would just feel alone and not know where to turn. And so student to student, the NAN Project, it's really pretty profound. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, my name is Brendan. I work at Cambridge Biotherapies right in the Cummings Center. We specialize in psychedelic therapy, which is for depression, anxiety, addiction. And with this new treatment modality, with MDMA looking like the FDA is going to approve that by the end of the year, with ketamine-assisted psychotherapy showing 70% efficacy rates, which is more than double that of SSRIs. How do we integrate this leading-edge technology into the sort of status quo treatment for mental health to get these sort of life-saving but new and unfamiliar treatments into the sort of daily lives of therapists and practitioners?
So Salem, actually, the Salem City Council passed a resolution in the last year supporting this new method with the psychedelics. the psilocybin, right? And they just wanted to go on record with the police department that because it's not legal, that someone not be charged should they be found under the influence or with that in their possession. Thought that was a pretty strong statement from a local legislative body. The legislature is taking a very strong look at this as well. There's a lot of discussion up at the State House on this, and because of the therapeutic side of this, especially with depression and with deep depression. So taking a very strong look at this as far as the legalization and not, again, doing what the Salem City Council did is not charging someone. And so stay tuned for that, and thank you for your work. It's new to me. It may not be new to some folks, but it's new to me. So I'm all ears to listen and learn more about the therapeutic side of this. So thanks for raising it. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on that from our panel. Yes.
Thanks for the question, Brendan. I don't have a lot of thoughts because you mentioned this is up and coming, right? And we are seeing more and more of it. I will admit I'm no expert in this kind of psychedelic treatment. It's fascinating. It seems to be effective based on what we're seeing, but it's early. That said, I would say that we have a lot of treatments presently that once upon a time were early. Right? ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, right? You're basically inducing seizures for patients who have treatment-resistant depression or other mental illness, right? TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, right? Other things like this that once upon a time seemed crazy to be doing, but now all of a sudden we're seeing evidence coming back and saying, yes, these things are effective. I think the magic word here is time. We need time to make sure that what we're doing is right, what we're doing is evidence-based and FDA approved, and as well as time for at the sort of state and federal level for things to be approved. Even a few years ago in Massachusetts, medical marijuana was not legal, and here we are today and it's legal. So I think the ball is rolling on those types of things. We just need to be making sure that we're doing everything right by the patient. And it's wonderful to hear there's programs like yours out there that I'm sure are making a massive difference in people's lives.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, we have oh, yes, sir.
I, first of all, would like to thank the group here for the really very informative and helpful information. And one of the things that I'm particularly thankful for is to hear that what's in your DNA can influence your addiction. My maternal grandfather ran a speakeasy in Western Pennsylvania. My father shipped booze from Canada into this country during Prohibition. And my father, excuse me, my father after Sunday Mass used to pour 3 shots, one for the Father, one for the Son, and one for the Holy Ghost. I have a question, and that is, I have been sober now for a little over 8 years. And thank you. And one of the things that got me to this point is that I made a pledge to myself that when the doctor tells me that I have a few months to live, I'm going to go out and get a case of scotch. And I didn't know whether or not that was a very good idea or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yes, please.
Just because this is a perfect moment. Dan is my neighbor. I could cry. Everything happens for a reason, right? Somebody had asked about how do we do this? Talking, right? I never knew this about him. And he lives across the street from me. He never knew I was sober until he started the patch, right? Dan inspires me every single day. I'm a fitness girl. Dan's had some heart issues. He used to walk in our neighborhood all the time. My poor dogs used to try to attack him because they're crazy. They attack everybody. But our neighborhood is a hill, and he couldn't walk the hill anymore. He drives his car to the flat part of our neighborhood and walks the flat part of the neighborhood and gets in his car and drives back home. Do you know how many people I share, which Dan doesn't know this, that if my neighbor, who looks like he's 60, and I have no idea how old he is, can drive his car to the top of the hill and get his walk in, you can get to the damn gym. Right? Thank you.
85.
What's that, 85? God bless you. So this is why we do this, because now I love Dan, Dan loves me, we have a beautiful neighbor relationship. This just made it even better, right? But that's the power of being vulnerable and sharing, because if I didn't share, he wouldn't have, I would have known that. He wouldn't have came today, right? And I know my She-Wolf girls are here. I teach this in my fitness class. When I first started doing my fitness classes, I had the worst, and I still, it's a work in progress, I had the worst imposter syndrome, because I'm like, I'm a drunk girl at the bar now teaching like fitness and like, you know, be strong. And I'm like, what the hell am I talking about, right? And I kept sharing, and I kept sharing a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. And I had girls be like, I thought I was the only girl in the North Shore that's sober. And I'm like, no, right? And now I have a sober sister chat that has 25 plus women that are working on their sobriety, right? I've had events where somebody would come because they were sober curious and hear something and figure out like, damn, this isn't working for me anymore. I don't need to have a rock bottom. I just have to not want to feel like this anymore, right? This is why we do what we do. The power of communication, the power of community. Find your people that are going to force you to be 1% better. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, question right here.
Hi, I'm Taylor. I used to work at NFI doing like family therapy, and now I'm a clinician at a school in Lynn. Just to discuss like the substance use, I'm using my phone right now because I get anxious while talking on mic. So it just sort of shocked me we had incoming 6th graders this year. Majority of them vape now. A lot of them were saying like they started in like 4th or 5th grade, and just like for me, checking in with my students requires like me to normalize, like we're all human, like not judging, acting curious, validating their feelings, their stories. They often tell me that they are told that substances and their stories are wrong, and we don't want to open up to people because we're wrong. I really try to focus on like alternatives, open dialogue, exploring coping strategies, interpersonal effectiveness skills. I use that all the time. Right now in health class, they all come to me saying like, we're just learning about vaping. Are they telling us it's bad? We know. So I'm really just trying to incorporate just like the distress tolerance skills, exploring their hobbies, setting boundaries with their peers and family around like, what's an effective way to communicate? How do I say yes? How do I say no? Working on not feeling like shame around substance use, or feeling emotion, or crying, or just really struggling with mental health. So I thank you guys all for speaking today. And just like substance use has been in my family, my father passed from alcoholism when I was 16. So I really try to keep the dialogue open with my students to try to really have that. I want to be the clinician that I wish I had growing up in middle and high school, and try to remind everyone that community and like communication is key. Communication, I just think like creating the community and being open, like what you were saying, just about like, you don't know unless you share. So thank you guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing and what you're doing with your students. And we see mental health issues all across the board in our post-pandemic world. It just kind of It's been very difficult for everybody, but especially for our young people, especially for our young people. So thank you for sharing. Other questions?
Hi,
Yes.
over here on the other side. My name's Jessica, and I work at Senior Care. We're a social service organization for older adults, so I just felt compelled to say something about that population. And I love what everyone's saying here about community and looking out for each other, because that's really what we got to do. I know, at least for my parents, they would not come to this, but I can talk to them about coming to this. They know I'm in therapy, they know, so we all have neighbors, we all have family, so let's not forget about that generation who didn't grow up with being able to talk about this. And folks in the room probably know the statistics better than I do, but the rates of suicide for older adults and men in particular, I believe is the highest rate of suicide. Depression, all that impacts that community as well. They're caregivers, they're stressed, and they don't necessarily know that there's resources out there, but we do, you do, so not be afraid to talk about it and normalize it with folks, because we love them. We don't want them suffering needlessly. So I just had to make a plug for those folks. Thanks.
Shout out to Senior Care. Senior Care is wonderful. They take care of our seniors right here in Beverly. So thank you for that. Yes.
Hi, thank you all for this and all the people putting this together. I'm trying to figure out what it is that I really want to say. I guess it's less of a question and more of just if we're going to have a community dialogue. I'm really curious about practicing our mindfulness and our narratives. And I think one of the things that feels like it's always missing in these conversations is the fact that these responses that we're trying to manage are actually what's really deeply well with us. And so I think like when we have boundary violations and when we have home situations that aren't healthy and we have things that happen to us or a culture that kind of is pretty oppressive, like actually these like the inability to cope with that is actually like a part of our healthy, what's deeply well with us, saying like no, or I'm in overwhelm, or this isn't okay. And so I'm really curious about if we can anchor these conversations in the knowing that actually what we're talking about is like where we're coming from. These behaviors are some expression of actually what's well with us. And how does that shift the narrative? And how can we build on that to have just an added sort of voice or note in the conversation that adds some perspective that can be helpful. So I know it's not a question, but it feels really important to have that as piece of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes.
So I was going to say to that with the mindfulness component is when we think about it, right, we have our own narratives, but there's the narratives that we have as a society, right? Individual within our family, there's a whole narrative that's there within the larger society, right? It builds upon itself. And just as we need to take the moment of mindfulness for ourselves in the moment as an individual, can you do it as a family? Can you do it as a society, right? Moments like this is a moment of mindfulness for us to start taking a step back, taking a look at what the issues are and having that discussion. So I think it goes into that sense of, all right, what is the narrative and recognizing what are the habits that we have that are positive and the ones that are destructive, and having that conversation to start to shift it. But it goes back even maybe to the first question is we need to look at our narrative as a society and take the time to communicate and have, in communication, it's about that relationship with one another and the openness. So let that be kind of the thing to build upon, is the vulnerability and openness that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions?
I have one right over here.
Yes.
Well, it's more of a comment. I'm a personal trainer, and I also work with mindset coaching. And I think that's something that's super important on top of obviously talking more about things. That's where we start. But also reminding ourselves and others, this is all of our first shot at life. Like, we don't know. We're all going to screw up. We're all going to mess up and go through stuff. but just realizing that we're all just human. This is all our first shot at life. It almost allows you to be a little bit more vulnerable having that perspective, but talking about things more and just reminding yourself that's really important. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And I think we have time for one more question. I see a hand up over here. And the microphone's coming.
Hi, so my name is Amy Peters. I am a psychiatric nurse. I work in behavioral health, mental health, and I think one of the big elephants in the room too is right now with financial states and everything is insurance. Like mental health is not covered enough. We have so many patients who will say like, I'm not feeling safe today, but I don't want to go to the emergency room because I'm going to get a $500 copay. How is that okay? Like that's crazy. You have free birth control for women, which is amazing, but not free naltrexone for like somebody struggling with addiction. So I think insurance needs to change because there's so many people that won't get help because they can't afford to. And I think that is a way bigger issue than anybody thinks about in general.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that and sharing your experience as a clinician. I will tell you, in the legislature, we passed a bill that would make your physical health, your mental health, as important as your physical health. So when you go in for a physical checkup, you also get a mental health checkup. But the cost factor and the copay factor is a real issue. So thank you for raising that. I will bring that back to the State House and have these discussions, because if someone feels like they can't get that because they can't afford that copay or that deductible, that's the problem. Thank you so much. Especially kids.
And if I could add to that, like when I'm doing an intake with a student, like a brand new student, that's one of the first questions I ask is like, what insurance do you have? And then I go, oh, well, that sucks. You know, so like that's typically, yeah. So you're right on, and that's a huge issue, and I'm really glad that Senator Lovely is going to bring it up because, yeah, that's killing people, literally. Yeah. So thank you.
And I do see one more hand, so we're going to allow one more, and then we will conclude. So right here, I see a hand up.
Hello, I'm actually kind of piggybacking off this. My name's Emily, and I have a private practice. I'm a pelvic health therapist. The reason I'm commenting on this is that many people who have pelvic health issues, oftentimes it's so related to mental health. And if you want to get a referral to see an insurance-based practice, it's oftentimes like a 6-month long wait. And then to come see me with a private practice, you're paying out of pocket. And I know that so many people can't afford this, but as a practitioner, what I'm trying to do so often is do workshops, right? So people can come in these big groups and they can come and get access to this. And I talk about mental health and how it's connected to pelvic floor therapy and your own pelvic health. But as practitioners ourselves, I think that this is something we can do to try to reach the community more, is try to offer more workshops so people can come together. We can, whether it's free workshops or whether it's something that we can do as a community together to say this is something we offer and we can all kind of come together and, touch on each one of our different domains. That's one way that we can maybe reaching to what you had mentioned earlier, just do more community work as practitioners.
Thank you. Appreciate you sharing that. That's so important to take a workshop approach so that we're creating more opportunity for people to be able to share their thoughts, what's going on in their lives. So I want to say thank you to everyone. I want to say thank you to all the panelists. This was wonderful. Thank you for sharing all of your experience, your expertise. I want to say thank you to this audience. Thank you for your great questions. We do hope that you were able to get something out of this. And I think, the message is from powerless to powerful, and that we're here to share. We're all human beings. We are not infallible. We've all had issues in our lives, some bigger than others, but we're here to share and we're here to help each other. So thank you so very much for attending tonight. Thank you.